Right. We've talked about HRV a number of times on this show and just how important that biomarker is for not just your stress, but your overall health. And today we're going to be discussing one of the most potent ways of moving that value to increase your HRV and put yourself into a more relaxed and calm or chill state. Outside of breathing, this is one of the fastest ways, and unlike breathing, it is extremely easy. It's simple. In fact, I have it around my neck right now for those of you watching the video version of this episode. And all you do is open up an app, click the mode you want, click start, and then sit back and relax. In this episode, we're discussing all things related to the vagus nerve, a little bit about heart rate variability, the biggest mistakes people make when they look into stimulating the vagus nerve, different ways you can activate it from modern technology to the natural techniques and ways. We explore the safety and the long term potential drawbacks of overstimulating the vagus nerve and how you can know just how much to actually do it, how this compares to having a vagus nerve stimulator implanted. Yes, that's right. Over 300,000 people around the world have this technology, albeit in a different form, actually implanted into their body and what exactly that does for you. This vagus nerve technology is not just for helping chronic conditions. We also explore an entirely different side of it, how it can keep you calm and in the flow state, even when under tremendous pressure. We discuss why lifestyle habits are more universally beneficial than biohacks and supplements and ingredients. If you're like me and you have no idea how this technology could benefit you, we get into that and a whole lot more, such as how different military units use vagus nerve stimulation, VNS technologies, stacks to get greater effects from your events and goals, whether that's meditation, brain training, sports, high stakes meetings, or others. Our guest this week shares what it feels like, and that's because that was before I had tried a VNS device. I now have one right here, and I've gone through about 10 sessions of it. With their device specifically, you can control the intensity, but basically, it feels like a minor TENS unit, if you know what that is. You apply some electrode gel to the front part of your neck, put this device, you wrap it around your neck, and you choose the intensity. And if you crank up the intensity very high, it can cause some like slight muscle contractions, but that's not necessary to get the benefits. In doing my research for the episode, I also noticed that the famous longevity biohacker Brian Johnson has popularized the technology yet again among biohackers. And there is a lot of talk in the forums about the different things that it's good for. Personally, I tried two modes and I've done about 10 sessions over the last 10 days, stress mode and anxiety mode, just to see what they're like. Now, I don't consider myself a very anxious person, but it certainly chilled me out. I didn't notice as much from the stress mode, but the anxiety mode I've found relaxing, almost like having an alcoholic drink, sans the sloppiness and the lack of coordination and other issues that can come from higher dose alcohol consumption and without the same performance degradation that you would otherwise get when doing some kind of functional assessment. I was skeptical about the claims that one session could really move heart rate variability all that much. So I'm currently wearing a chest strap and I used Elite HRV to do some open readings of my HRV before, during, and after a session. Not only did I see my raw HRV increase after the session, but I also saw a metric called LF to HF ratio decrease, which means that I was less sympathetically active, or AKA, I was more relaxed and in the parasympathetic mode. My score went from 11 down to 7.5. So it clearly had some effect. And I've repeated that several days in a row, noticing similar things. And again, I have the best effects from the anxiety mode. stress mode doesn't do quite as much to my HRV. Our guest this week is Vitalijus Majorovas. He's a sleep biohacker, geek, and certified Buteyko Clinic breathing instructor who has spent more than 10 years in the sleep products industry. As he mentions in the episode, Vitalijus did a 200-night experiment where he tested more than 70 sleep hacks and invented a neuromodulation device. His journey from corporate burnout led him to create the Pulsetto vagus nerve stimulator, which I'm currently wearing. If you want to check out the things that we discuss in this episode, you can find everything in the show notes, which will be at mindbodypeak.com/the number 166. And if you want to try Pulsetto for yourself, you can use the code URBAN to save 10% on your order. Having some fundamental knowledge about how the vagus nerve works and what you can do to modulate it can be an absolute game changer for your overall health, as well as, of course, stress and recovery. So, if you take nothing else from this episode, I hope you realize how many different ways you have of taking control of your state for better health. All right, sit back, relax, and enjoy this podcast episode with Vitalijus. Vitalijus, welcome to the podcast.
Hi.
Today, we're going to be diving into your specialty, and that is all things the vagus nerve. So, to start off, will you warm up with me and tell me some of the unusual non-negotiables you've done so far today for your health, your performance, and your bioharmony?
Good question for the start. To be honest, I spent a lot of years in corporate world. I was working in the sleep product industry in different countries in Europe, different countries, different companies. But at the same time, I had some issues with sleep. I was working like a crazy, like a 14, 15 hours per day, something like that. And then when I was 29-year-old, it was a lot of problems, especially from the sleep side, because I was sleeping like a 4 hours. At that moment, I work in Turkey in the turnaround management, so it was a lot of emotional stuff in the work and etc. And I remember that one day panic attack starts, and I got a lot of blood samples. Doctors try to understand why it's happening, and in the end of the story, they wrote me Xanax when I was 29. When I said to mother said, "Look, it's a bad way. The way is going to the disaster because it's creating addiction and etc." So I realized that I need to do something, and I started to change. And of course, I started from sleep. And at that moment, because I was working in the sleep industry, I just wanted to see what other things beside mattresses, pillows, and etc. can influence the sleep. So I started this kind of few hundred night experiments. So I took a list of things which has some kind of scientific, let's say, findings, and I tested one of those things 3 nights in a row. At that moment, I had a few trackers to measure the sleep, let's say, duration, some sleep quality, things like deep sleep and etc. Of course, it was not a scientific study, but still I saw some kind of trends, and etc. And I tested those 70 things. Some of them was really crazy. I remember the first thing was kiwi. Kiwi is a fruit because you can find several scientific studies. If you're eating kiwi, you can change your sleep and etc. So I ate kiwi for 3 nights in a row and just saw is it really changing my sleep behaviors and etc. So, but the main point after those, let's say, 200 nights, I really realized that how much, because I thought that I'm sleeping normal, like nothing super fancy, and etc. But then I realized that what is the big gap between the normal perfect sleep, and when you're fulfilling this gap, then you are getting much bigger productivity, energy, sharper mind, and etc. So this is how I came to the biohacking concept. This is how I came to the longevity concept. And that's why I'm so curious about this topic. And one day I met vagus nerve in my, let's say, finding and research time, I met vagus nerve, and then I realized that it's really interesting topic, to dig deeper.
We will get to that in a minute, but out of those 200 nights, did you find anything that worked really well? And of course, sleep is pretty individual. Like what works great for me might not work at all for you. But were there like three or four or five things that you found that were most consistent or effective for you?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, for example, those things I believe that quite universal because they have a lot of studies and let's say not one or two researchers, but meta-analysis of things. And yeah, I mean, first of all, it's a bedroom very important. Darkness and cooling effect. So the temperature and the complete darkness is the super important. I mean, we can always say that mattress or pillow or bedding set is very important, but in reality, even if the room is plus 30, yeah, even if you will sleep on 10,000 euro or dollars mattress, it cannot, be the main stuff. So the bedroom and darkness and cooling effect is very important. Of course, then to deal with triggers is very important because it's like with weight control. Maybe you don't need to go to the gym like a crazy. Maybe you just need to deal with triggers. Stop eating, I don't know, junk food and stop drinking calories, and that's it. So the same with sleep. There are very bad things, caffeine, alcohol, and then the blue light, and if you can control those things, maybe you don't need even to create additional new, let's say, tricks and hacks and etc. Then stress, for sure, it's a big enemy of the melatonin, and I mean the cortisol in general is like a hormone of antagonist. So it means that if you have in the evening more cortisol, you have, let's say, producing less amount of melatonin. So you need to do something with stress. There are many things, what you can do. You can make meditation, you can make breathing exercises, you can wear pulsetto, you can, I don't know, do other bunch of things. Then I think very important is to have the routine, your own routine. So for example, I have my own routine. It's like a 10-3-2-1, like what I'm doing 10 hours before sleep, 3-2-1. I am not every day using this routine, but for example, when I have bad sleep, because it's normal to have like a one or two bad night per month, but I really don't want to avoid those situations when I'm doing in a row. When I have like a bad 3 bad nights in a row. So whenever I have bad night sleep, let's say I'm switching on to this routine, and basically it's like a 10 hours before sleep. I'm just trying to consume the last coffee. It means the last coffee caffeine is before, let's say, after lunch, latest, something like that. Then 3 hours before sleep, some kind of physical activity. It's like it can be even walking or some. Then 2 hours before sleep, blue light things. So it means cut as much as possible the light sources, and then 1 hour before sleep, some kind of stress reduction exercise. Doesn't matter. It's a breathing, yoga, meditation. Doesn't matter. So this is I'm doing not every day, but let's say 3-4 days per week. And then I think the morning is very important because everything starts from the morning. So light, and to get as much possible light in the first part of the day, especially let's say in the morning, is very crucial. So those things, it can be even more things, but I think those things are quite universal. They have quite a lot of studies, and it's not only works for me, but I think for the other people also.
I love the idea of never having 2 bad nights of sleep in a row, because if you're doing that, then you'll make sure that your body is getting the adequate rest, and also the fact that a lot of your protocols and strategies are lifestyle based, because even some of the most proven sleep supplements, like say magnesium or melatonin, they both work great for a lot of people, but then certain people are paradoxical responders where they get energy and they wake up like clockwork at 2, 3 a.m. if they use magnesium or melatonin.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I agree. I agree. It's those supplements. It's good at some point, but it's not like a super universal stuff. I mean, at this moment, for example, I'm really in love with mouth taping. Not, I mean, I am not snoring in general, but I mean, I just realized because I'm measuring SpO2, the oxygen, let's say, saturation level, that whenever I'm doing when I'm sleeping with mouth tape, and I'm using those kind of stickers, on my mouth, my SpO2 level is much higher comparing with that I'm not wearing this. And I big believe, but I didn't found any evidence, but I'm big believe that if you have big oxygen levels, let's say like a 99 or even 100, it can increase the deep sleep. I found some mini studies, but it's not a meta-analysis and etc. Because more oxygen, better you are refreshed. I mean, I feel better. I cannot prove with, I don't know, some scientific studies or something like that, but I'm just really big fan of mouth taping. And if somebody is snoring, I believe this is the must what you need to do, because majority of people are snoring because they cannot switch to nose breathing during the night.
Yeah, pre-COVID, I'd used mouth taping every single night for about 2 years, and eventually I realized that I didn't even have to cover up my entire mouth. A strip vertically and left a little bit of gap on either side. I could still breathe in an emergency if I had to. If I woke up and I was gasping for air, and I would still anatomically shift my jaw and tongue and put it into a place where my blood oxygenation, my SpO2, was higher. And as a result of it being higher, I would wake up fewer times throughout the night. I could see that reliably on my Aura Ring data and other wearables, where all of a sudden I wake up, I went from waking up 10 times per night to two, three, and made a big difference. It also forces you to nose breathe, and the nose, breathing through the nose has about somewhere in the 30s functions and benefits that you don't get when you mouth breathe. And the caveat is if you have a sinus infection or clogged sinuses for any reason, obviously taping over your entire mouth is not going to be a good idea. But for someone who's healthy and is able to breathe freely through the nose, it has a lot of benefits.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, I'm also one of the instructors of Buteco breathing method. Once, I mean, and Buteco is very big promoters of the nose breathing, and I mean, Oxygen Advantage and Patrick McKeown.
One way to increase the vagal nerve tone is to control our breathing. But before we start talking about ways of increasing the and toning the vagus nerve, let's talk about what it is and why you've decided to pursue it and focus so heavily on it.
Basically, it's one of the nerves. The uniqueness of this nerve that it has branches in every organ, and connects basically the brain with, let's say, internal organs, the brain with the gut. You can say that's like a highway between the brain and the gut. But you need to imagine that it's not like a nerve, it's not like a wire. Yeah, it's more than it's more about internet connections, a lot of, let's say, fibers, a lot of branches. Basically, it's not a one nerve, it's 160,000 branches. And when you are electrically stimulate specific branches, you can tackle specific things. This is the most fascinating fact, and this is where still the science didn't found all the answers, because specific fibers of the vagus nerves are responsible for specific things. In majority of cases, vagus nerve is like uh, responsible for switching to the parasympathetic nervous system, which basically is rest and digest. So it's all about cooling down yourself, decreasing the heart rate, decreasing the breath rate, relaxing the muscles, and etc. But at the same time, vagus nerve can be a quite important, let's say, control center of inflammation. Some of the vagus nerve fibers can really work well with migraine, and there are a lot of studies about it. So I mean, it's quite interesting because, like I said, different fibers can tackle different things. And my story is very simple. My wife, she has cluster head pain. It's 10 times stronger than migraine, something like that. It appears very rare, like a 1% of population has this stuff, and it can be like a 2 years without this pain, and then once, let's say, for 1 week during the night you have this pain, and the other name of this pain is suicidal pain, because it's like somebody's cutting your head, and part of the head usually. And we try a lot of things because there is no basically treatment. We try drugs, we try oxygen therapy. I even bought these big oxygen balloons, and etc. There is some studies about LSD microdosing and possible treatment of this. And then 5 years ago, I read article about vagus nerve stimulation and possible treatment of cluster head pains. So this is how I dig deeper in this topic. At the same time, I tested a lot of those biohacker night, stuff, and etc. And I realized that I need to test. I found in Lithuania one device, who was like a vagus nerve stimulator. I found a guy who is like the best person in Baltic states about the vagus nerve. And this is my partner, by the way. So this is how we met with my partner. At that moment, he worked with the invasive vagus nerve stimulators, because invasive nerve stimulators, they're treating epilepsy. There are a lot of people in the world, around 300,000 people, who have implantable vagus nerve stimulators, and this is one of the best treatments of epilepsy. Originally, this was the main thing of the vagus nerve, and the first, let's say, implant was 20 years ago. And then only then they realized, when they started to study those patients with the implants, that they realized that this is also good for the other things, like depression, like relaxation, like inflammation management, and then they realized that it's also very good for the migraine and cluster head pains. Now there is even one device in the market who can treat cluster head pains, and it's a vagus nerve stimulator, medical device, and you can, for example, even in Lithuania, you can prescribe this device and have a treatment. So this was my motivation, and this is how we created. We saw that it's a gap. There is no, let's say, devices for the users, for the like commercial usage, and there is no user-friendly devices, and this is how we start building the Pulsetto.
I want to explore a little more about the biology, how this all works, because as you mentioned earlier, if it can be viewed as the internet for the body, connecting the brain to all the organs and organ systems. Obviously, that's going to be very important. You also mentioned how it's involved in the stress response or the stress switch. And as I understand it, there's the autonomic nervous system, which is comprised of the parasympathetic and sympathetic branches. The sympathetics often called the fight, flight, or freeze branch, and the sympathetic or parasympathetics called the rest and digest. And by stimulating the nerve, you're able to help the body shift from the stimulated state, the fight, flight, or freeze state, into a relaxation state. And when you're in that relaxation state, then a lot of the systems in the body calm down, the neuronal firing quiets, everything starts going back to baseline. And a lot of these conditions that you're mentioning, such as the extreme migraines, are actually caused by overactivation of the one branch and underactivation of the other.
I mean, you're very correct in this description. I mean, basically, uh, what I need to add that basically let's say, from those 160,000 fibers, around 70% are here. The nerve is very strong in the tragus area, in the ear region. Uh, then it goes down, and it has super big branch on the neck, in both sides of the neck, near the sleep artery, and then around 20% of fibers are going to the organs, let's say, a little bit on the chest, and etc. So when you are tackling electric signal, and electric signal, by the way, consists of different parameters, for example, voltage, amplitude, pulse wave, pulse width. You can switch on specific vagus nerve fibers, and majority of them are responsible to switch the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest. So it means that we can see, when we are activating the nerve, we can see, for example, that heart rate is changing, the heart rate is decreasing. Or in some cases, we see quite fast response in heart rate variability. The other metric, what we can see if we are using some kind of third-party wearable devices, and etc. At the same time, if you are taking the blood samples, for example, what we can see, that if you are tackling specific vagus nerve fibers in the spleen, you are releasing acetylcholine. This is one of the neurotransmitters which is very responsible for the heart rate decreasement, but also it's responsible for the inflammation management. And it's very fascinating, because it means that electric signal inside of the body turns to the chemical signal and neurotransmitter acetylcholine. So this is how basically it works, and basically we see from one side measurable things like heart rate variability, in some cases even the blood pressure decreasement, breathing rate decreasement. So basically this represents, let's say, the parasympathetic nervous system prove that it's switched on. And then from other side we have some neurotransmitters who are released during the stimulation, and then this is how they're good in case of the, let's say, migraine, or in case of inflammation management, and etc. So basically this is the basics. And I also need to add that it's very normal that during the day we are switching on between the fight and flight, yeah, and rest and digest. It's normal. It's impossible that we will be always in the parasympathetic nervous system. I mean, you from the stress point, you need to find the sweet spot. Yeah, too relaxed is not good. Too stressed is also not good, because you're very narrow in your thinking and etc. So you need to find the sweet spot. The biggest problem of existing, let's say, environment and world, that we are too constantly switching to the fight and flight. Every Slack message, every, I don't know, I mean, you are driving on the car, and then somebody is like, you know trying to move you to the fight and flight, and you're seeing Instagram reels, and then suddenly you're become it's and then what's happening, that you're becoming chronic stress, because you cannot easily switch back to the parasympathetic nervous system if you're constantly every 5 minutes in the fight and flight. So by activating the vagus nerve, you are helping to return back to this relaxed state. But it's impossible to be in this relaxed state for a whole day.
So, looking at this through the ancestral lens, humans didn't used to have so many stressors, so many triggers in their environment that would flip them into the sympathetic, stressed out state. They used to have to, say, avoid a tiger or something, like one of those cliches, and they'd run away. Then they'd be parasympathetic a lot of the rest of the day. But now, because of technology, because of modernity and having cars and all these different things, many of us are spending a big portion of our day in the stressed out state. And it's well established at this point that stress is a root of all disease, and it can interfere with healthy inflammation levels and all that. But then, from the same evolutionary basis, how would humans regulate the vagus nerve before technology? Because as I understand it, there's a number of different things we can do that already influence vagus nerve activity.
Exactly. I mean, back to the basics, and basically biohacking is about back to the basics, and sometimes we are just losing the basics. And the same is with sleep, the same is with breathing. It's a free stuff, but then we are spending hundreds or thousands, for the tools, because we cannot use anymore normally the free stuff, so the same with vagus nerve. You can activate vagus nerve at home, without any, let's say, technology things and etc. For example, breathing, it's one of the parts of this. Breathing is really activates the vagus nerve. Just maybe the problem that it takes a little bit more time. It's like a 20 minutes to make some vagus nerve activation. But for example, this is really good. Humming, it's quite becoming quite popular and trendy stuff, but it's really because it's also related with the neck region and etc. This sound of it's a cold shower on the face region. It's also quite nice. Jaw massage. There is some specific Stanley Rosenberg techniques and etc. But I mean, basically the breathing, the humming, the singing, even. I mean, those kind of activities, which because they're quite actively involving the movements and of those, let's say, areas of the body and nerves. It was like a free stuff. But nowadays, because people are lazy, those devices allow us to do it much faster, and you don't need to spend, I don't know, 20 minutes in some kind of specific environment to make a breathing exercises. You can just wear the device, and speak with you, and to do this activation of the nerve.
When you're breathing, is there a certain cadence or protocol that has the best effects? Like, for example, if you did the shallower breaths, like say the Wim Hof or the Tumo or the fire breathing, as it's sometimes called, that's going to be more stimulating. And I have a feeling that's going to take you into deeper into the sympathetic state, less of the parasympathetic, less relaxation. I'm guessing you wouldn't want to do that.
I mean, tempo of the breath is the one the big criteria, because like an average tempo is like a what 20 12 16 times per minute, something like that. I mean, breathe in, breathe out. If you are decreasing this tempo to 6 8, it means by half. you're quite strongly decreasing the heart rate. You're quite, I mean, you're quite fast also influencing the vagus nerve, and switching on the parasympathetic nervous system. So lowering the tempo, and other very big part of this small thing but very important thing, because when you're breathing in, you're increasing the heart rate, and when you're breathing out, you're decreasing the heart rate. This is how our body works. So if your breath outs will be longer compared to the breath ins, so the same, I mean, you will decrease the heart rate faster, and one more time you will activate the vagal tone, and the parasympathetic nervous system. So those things probably are most important, and there are a bunch of exercises like I don't know, box breathing, the diaphragmatic breathing, and etc. So it doesn't matter so much the technique, let's say, but those two components of tempo and longer breathe outs is the two most important things.
Yeah, so to use this for vagus nerve improvement, then you just want to focus on slowing down the breath rate overall and making your exhalation longer than your inhalation to keep your heart rate lower, which then translates to better vagus nerve.
With yourself, I mean, yeah, I mean, for example, you made some kind of high intensive interval. You saw your heart rate is increased, and then just try to play with the tempo and longer breath outs. You will see immediately how fast your heart rate is dropping.
Is there a mechanical component here? Because when you're humming, chanting, singing, doing these things, you're going to be like vibrating your voice box and like that neck area. Maybe less so when you're doing breath work, but it seems like even the massage, those all have like some kind of pressure component.
Yeah, it has some pressure components because the nerve is under the muscle, under the fat, so you need to. So that's why you need not so easy to reach it. Or in case of breathing, that's why you need, let's say, more time. It means to spend, let's say, at least 20 minutes of breathing. In case of humming, very similar. I mean, the sound is not so strong, and in order to reach the nerve level, you need to do it for the longer period of time or very loudly, in other words. And the massage is also, you don't need to expect that if you will massage on 1 minute, it will be automatically activated. So theoretically, it sounds very easy that let's do some massage, let's do some humming, but in reality, I mean, it takes time because to activate and switch on the nerve, go under the muscle, it's quite hard. That's why, for example, when we created this device, the signal itself is quite strong, quite deep. I mean, the sensation of the electrical vagus nerve stimulation is very similar to the TENS, to the muscle stimulation. Those devices, just muscle stimulators, they're going to the muscle level. We need to go deeper to the nerve level. So that's why the signal itself, I mean, the voltage, the amplitude, the waves are a little bit different animals, let's say, in this case. Yeah.
Are there any at home tests I could do, for example, or listeners could do to determine if this would really make a difference for them? Like, for example, if I have a really low HRV, I could tell that from my wearable data and say, okay, this might be something worth considering. Or if my resting heart rate is higher than I think it should be, or I see a trend upward in the last period of time. And of course, figuring out the underlying cause of that and addressing that is going to be the most important. And then, as an add on, perhaps also working on the vagus nerve at the same time.
One of the parameters is HRV for sure. Just if you will speak more about HRV, it's quite complex metric. It's not only dependable on some electric stimulation, but it's also dependent on a lot of things. For example, if you will, at one point you will wear Pulsetto, another on the other point you will drink wine. You cannot expect a miracle. Because alcohol is very drastically decreasing the HRV, and etc. But HRV is one of the metrics, and I can even say that HRV is the represents basically the vagus nerve strength, or the tone of the vagus nerve. Because the stronger the tone, then it means that, let's say, less problems you have in connection of gut and brain. Because if you have low tone, it means that then you have those kind of situations of leaky gut, brain fog, and etc. Because neurons are traveling through the vagus nerve between the brain and organs. And for example, just a simple example, liver, for example, it has around 500 functions. So brain somehow needs to get information, are those functions are okay. Yeah, the checkup status. So this information goes through the vagus nerve, and then if the signal is bad, not enough information comes to the brain, and then brain little bit, are in shock, and then they can send the wrong commands, let's say. But if the strength is good, the brain then sends the normal commands. For example, please relax, please reduce the heart rate, please relax the bile, etc. So the strength of the nerve is very important. HRV basically represented. Uh, Very roughly, we can say that if the HRV is, let's say, about 50, so the bigger HRV, the better is. If it's around 50, let's say, you can improve. If it's, let's say, from 50 to 80, it's quite okay, quite good. If it's more than 80, I think it's okay. So the stronger the HRV, the stronger the nerve. So by doing, let's say, vagus nerve stimulation for some specific period of time, you will see the improvement of HRV. But if the behavior changes, if you will not, be in the bad things like alcohol consumption, or if you will sleep normally and etc. So because this is the complex metric. So this is one side. You will see the changes of the heart rate, and you will see the changes of the heart rate variability. But the other thing is more, let's say, subjective things, but still we see in a lot of cases when vagus nerve is activated, and when we are doing quite strong electric stimulation, the lip dip it goes down. It's a quite interesting experience, but it's not only for us, but also for the other, let's say, vagus nerve stimulators. With some specific deep signal, we see the lip dip. And the second subjective thing is saliva in the mouth. During the vagus nerve activation, you are increasing the saliva in the mouth. That's why it's rest and digest. Yes, so it's all about digestion, etc. You can see, by the way, with breathing exercise is the same. If you didn't did like a protocol of some kind of breathing exercise experience, you will see much bigger amount of saliva in your mind. So this is also the part of the but this subjective feeling, because different people have little bit different, let's say, genetics or whatever, but still.
Vitalijus, what are some of the causes of like low vagal nerve tone? Like, for example, when you were sleeping 4 hours per night, I'm going to assume that's going to keep your body in a more stressed out state, and you would stand to really gain from extra stimulation of the vagus nerve.
Yeah, this is the one. For example, what I see, that a lot of people who are not doing physical activity, or I mean obese people and etc., they have quite high heart rate, resting heart rate, because like a normal resting heart rate could, be between 50 and 90. And the bigger the heart rate you have, usually the lower heart rate variability you have. It's like very connected in a lot of cases, and the bigger the heart rate variability, usually lower the heart rate you have. For example, I know professional athletes, and they have like a 40 beats per minute when they're sleeping, and etc. So usually a high heart rate represents resting heart rate represents already quite, let's say, bad situation. So I don't say that all obese people they have this, but it's a quite, let's say, related to this. Then there are specific areas. For example, there are quite interesting studies that shown that COVID made, and long COVID especially, they made damage of the vagus nerve. uh, and it's quite I mean, quite massive data already about it. So it could be also this related with this. And there are some genetic things also which can influence the vagus nerve strength. But the probably the most positive thing that you can change. You can always strengthen this. I mean, I cannot say that it's like a muscle, but it's quite similar. I mean, you can, by doing positive changes in your life, you can strengthen this nerve. It's practically impossible. There are, of course, cases that you are damaging the vagus nerve, and you're basically, it's impossible to return back. But those cases are very, very rare and very, very small.
That's nice. It's very modifiable. So if we have poor vagal nerve tone, we can increase it by using some lifestyle switches, some improvements, and should see a response from that alone. And then we can also look to other ways to further increase it.
I mean, interesting data are from those people who have implantable vagus nerve stimulators. Like I said, there are 300,000 people, and some of them already wearing this implant for 10 years, something like that. So it's a lot of data. And what they saw that, because, for example, if you have epilepsy, you can have like a 10 seizures per hour, something like that, you know, and every seizure can be deadly, basically. So what those devices, implantable stimulators, they're doing, whenever they see the seizure is coming, they're switching on and sending the blocking signal to the brain, basically. So they can switch on every 5 minutes, theoretically. So what they saw, that one negative side effect, what could be, with this constant switching on, that you can overstimulate the nerve. But in order to overstimulate the vagus nerve, and then overstimulation of the nerve can lead to the damaging of the nerve. So in order to overstimulate the nerve, you need to stimulate the nerve more than 12 hours per day by electricity. I mean, still, it's theoretically possible, but there is a possibility that you can overstimulate it.
Aside from decreased seizures, which is obviously like life saving for the people with implantable vagus nerve stimulators, what are some of the other side benefits that they experience? Either that population specifically, because there's a lot of data for their usage, or people who perhaps don't have any conditions and they just want to improve their health and well-being and performance and everything. Aside from seeing some biomarker changes on paper, which is nice, like what are the more real world outcomes you've seen?
I mean, there is even a term in sport. It's neurodoping. It's not only about the vagus nerve, but in general, when you're doing neuromodulation techniques, and neuromodulation means electric stimulation techniques, in order to gain some advantage. And there are professional athletes who are using it, for example, for better recovery, for stronger muscle enhancement, for better coordination, and etc. They are using electric stimulation devices to get advantage. And this is why this neurodoping is called, because anti-doping association cannot do nothing at this moment with this. I mean, because it's not go beyond traditional, let's say, doping norms, but it's just ethical point of view. So there are more and more sport people who are using it just because they are recovering better, they are less stressed, because this is very important, and etc. So even in our case, for example, we have one customer, very real example. He's the professional poker player, and he's playing in the poker tournaments with this device, because he said, when I'm playing the poker on the table, my heart rate is 120. I'm just sitting, but my heart is like a very tough, very very high. And when I have very high heart rate, I'm narrowing my vision, and then when I'm narrowing my vision, I'm losing the momentum, and the, let's say, competitor eye movements, which is very important in the poker. Yeah, it's sports psychology. So let's say with our device, he's decreasing the heart rate by 9 points, which is, I mean, not like super, but still is a big, for the professional athletes. Small changes can lead to the big, let's say, results.
That's very significant too, because anyone who's competed high level in sports knows that as your heart rate goes up, your vision narrows, you get tunnel vision, and you can't integrate ideas. You're not quite as effective and sharp as usual. But then also, you make worse decisions. And there's lots of research on the effect of increasing heart rate on performance, detrimentally affecting performance. So if you're able to keep heart rate down, especially as the pressure's increasing, whether it's on the field for sports or if it's in the boardroom in on the job, you're going to do better overall at whatever task it is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for example, one of the I know the case from Tim O'Donnell, so one of the top Ironman athletes. He was using transcranial current direct stimulation. In other words, he was using the, let's say, low signal brain stimulation, to make the better recovery and muscle enhancement. And it was one of his tools for his success in the last 10 years of the Ironman. So I mean, yeah, the sport people are using in some cases these devices, and like I said, there are a lot of electric stimulation devices, but at the same time we have bunch of sick people, and majority of them, they are addicted to drugs, to medical drugs. I mean, because if you are talking about, I don't know, epilepsy, migraine, depression, it's quite a lot of people. It's like a 30% of population, and majority of those people are addicted to the drugs. And the biggest problem of the drugs is addiction, and there are big rates of deaths of overdose, especially in US, because it's like a opioid epidemic. Everybody's giving those strong opioids, like for free, and etc. So with electric stimulation, there is no side effect. You cannot be addicted, and the market is quite big. For example, there are deep brain stimulators. They are treating Parkinson. There are spinal cord stimulators. They are treating very strong chronic pains when the painkillers cannot help anymore. So for those, let's say, sick people, it can be a very good alternative for the medical drugs. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll go back to the performance side for a second because I was just thinking I've used some of the technologies, the transcranial direct stimulation and alternating stimulation, all those where you're applying electrodes to different parts of your head, running a small microcurrent of electricity with the goal of stimulating learning and memory via brain chemicals like acetylcholine. You referenced that one earlier. And I know that I've seen certain devices that can, based on the research, actually do that. But are vagus nerve stimulators, by their action on certain brain chemicals, able to stimulate learning and memory and to say accelerate it?
There are with Pulsetto, we are doing a lot of studies, but not in this field. But for example, I know one company, they are working very much with U.S. Army, and from one side, they are working with PTSD ex-veterans, but from other side, they are working with existing army soldiers. And for example, one of the typical case that soldier, they're like have very low amount of sleep, let's say, because they are in some kind of let's say combat phase or whatever. And then the next day they need to make a decision. And usually when you lack of sleep, then you have issues with concentration, with decision making, etc. And they see that the vagus stimulation, one more time, specific electric signal which can activate specific fibers of the vagus nerve, can increase the alertness and mental clarity. So we never did study like this, despite the fact that we already now also working with Lithuanian forces, but on the little bit different things. So there is a possibility, but one more time, it must be covered different, let's say, fibers of the vagus nerve.
So the technology has a potential. It hasn't been studied, and it would probably have a bit different parameters than the current uses.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
One thing I think about in general with all this kind of stuff is what is the safety of it? Because in general, I know you mentioned there's no side effects, but in general, when the body is protecting itself, it'll downregulate hormones, neurotransmitters as like a safety mechanism to prevent some kind of potential drawbacks. Is there going to be any potential longer term consequences of, in a way, overriding what the body is doing? Perhaps usually when vagus nerve issues arise, it's because it gets stuck in a deactivated state, but what do you think about like long term on this?
I believe no, but your question is very logical. For example, when you're consuming hormones, let's say, I don't know, testosterone, etc., there is a risk to have this negative loop. It means that you will not produce any more organically this hormone, yeah, because it's too much hormone coming from the outside, and etc. The same with melatonin and others. Uh, there are no, let's say, data or that something like negative loop exists with electric stimulation. And let's say the data is quite big, because it is already 20 years, let's say, science is not like a fresh or something like that. So because, I mean, probably the biggest explanation that human is electric machine, so it's just it's quite natural for him to give some electricity, and etc. Of course, we will see more, but I a big believer that it will be no, because already the consequences probably, we saw, if it was something, bad, with this. I'm big believer that it's like with supplements. I read just that 5 years ago, it was like a statistic that every third person use supplements daily. I mean, like minerals, vitamins, etc. Now the statistic is every eight. So I mean, sorry, 8 from 10. So it's like 80%. Before it was 30% people are using daily. Now it's 80%. I mean, you can live without supplements. Yeah. I mean, it's you can live without supplements if you're doing the good nutrition, etc. But if you want to optimize your health, probably you need at some point some kind of supplements. Yeah. And supplement business made huge education about it. It's like a normal, to take some kind of pill or whatever. I totally believe that after 5 years, it will be totally normal to wear something. Yeah, like I mean, it will be a lot of people with Pulsetto. It will be a lot of people with Neuralink, implants. It will be a lot of people who are wearing some headbands, some wristbands, and so it will be total norm. Like now, it total norm became to consume, I don't know, omega 3 or D vitamin or whatever, just to optimize the health, and I think more people are also taking care of prevention, and more people are taking care of their health optimization at the same time also.
When I think about the body tampering down and reducing the activity of certain things, there's like generally two reasons. It's first because it's part of a negative feedback loop. You use exogenous hormones and your body says, I don't need any more. I have it here circulating. No point of using energy for this. But then the other is a bit different. It's as a protective mechanism. So if you fast all the time, you don't get enough nutrients, your body's going to say, hey, we're in a time of scarcity. I need to scale back, decrease the energy output so that I have more in case I can't get food for another week. So then you see things like thyroid decreasing. And if you just mechanistically override the body's natural process by introducing more thyroid in any form, you're overriding its safety mechanism, as I call it, of like, we're in a time of scarcity, so we're going to conserve resources. And that could be the case here. I'm not sure it is, because it could just be that, like I was saying, that the vagus nerve gets stuck in a certain deactivated state, and that just by giving a little push, a little support, then it's able to kick back into gear and help the body work more efficiently. But do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, maybe, but from others' point of view, when we are talking about vagus nerve stimulation, we need to understand that it's a very fast approach. You don't need to wear or hold or whatever device for ages. It usually takes like a 5 minute per stimulation. You need to hold, let's say, this device for hours, like a 5 minutes, I don't know, twice per day. And even the hardest protocols, for example, for the cluster head pain or migraine, it's like max 10 minutes stimulation, so it's a quite, let's say, relatively small amount of electricity. Okay, it's targeted, it's more less stronger, but it's quite small amount of electricity comparing what the body provides, during the 24 hours and etc. So this is the one thing. Other thing, still, there are, believe me, for example, now one of the biggest probably expert and science person in the vagus nerve, Kevin Tracy, he's working on implantable, very precise device to treat arthritis, and there is already several clinical trials about it. And it's, I mean, if you have arthritis, it's a, I mean, if you can have the treatment like this, it's like a life-changing event, for you. And there are, sadly, but there are a lot of people who have those kind of chronic things, and for them, they can probably sacrifice possible long-term theoretical consequences for the right now solution. Even now, for example, we made a study, a small study with the bacteria disease patients. You don't, you cannot imagine. It's a very rare disease. They have super strong joint pain. It's an inflammation related joint pain, and basically every morning they have like a 3 hours of stiffness, super big stiffness. They're waking up and then, just 3 hours to be in the normal shape. So when you're doing something for this, in our case, we didn't completely change the pain, but we decrease the stiffness in a lot of cases by even half and etc. So for them, it's like a game changer. Their mood is becoming better, and then they're saying that the sleep is becoming it's subjective, but still, I mean, they are, I mean, feeling completely different. And when we are speaking and we are looking that those chronic people are representing bigger and bigger population of the world, then probably we need to focus on positive things, short term positive things. But yeah, let's see what, for example, Neuralink, what kind of long term effect it will have. But still, I'm a big believer that it's comparing to drugs, it's much better, and
Yeah, and you're right. That's a good point that if it helps them live their life, it helps them sleep better, eat better, do all these other things that are fundamental to their health, even if it doesn't have like 100% pure benefits, it'll help them get that baseline to which they can look at, okay, what are the possible root causes of whatever condition this is? Okay, I'm going to work on these now. But if you're just writhing in pain, unable to leave bed all day, it doesn't matter how you're able to track down the root causes. You can't think through the root causes to begin with. You can't go about implementing the lifestyle change if you can't even like live your life.
exactly. Maybe what this is the spark to change your like everything, and maybe exactly this is the domino effect. Yeah, maybe by changing your mood, you are better sleeping, and then you're changing your other behaviors and etc. So yeah, it's a philosophy, but it's a good point, of course. I mean, we don't know what will be after 15 years of the vagus nerve stimulation. I mean, but we don't know probably what will be if we will 50 years we will consume omega 3. Maybe maybe it also will be some negative loop or whatever. So it's yeah.
Do you know of any effect on the hormones?
Yeah, there are. We never dig so deep in level of the cortisol yet, because it's more complicated, because this hormone has like a cycles, yeah, and circadian rhythm is very influencing this hormone, so you can make wrong conclusions. It's very dependable, on let's say endocrinic system health of the person. It's very dependable on the day duration, in the morning it's different from, let's say, middle of the day and etc. But there are, I mean, of course, it's a link between the cortisol and the vagus nerve stimulation, cortisol decreasement, but it's quite harder to make the let's say complete correlation between those two things.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to look at metabolites and you have to figure out a way of sampling it multiple times throughout the day using like a Dutch test or some
Mean,
kind
when
of
you're
other
going deep
testing. And
into
it's
the hormone level, it's like a Santa Barbara, this kind of, it's like those hormones, like they're like enemies and friends, they're influencing each other. I mean, it's a crazy world. I mean, it's crazy.
one thing I've heard about when people use these types of devices is that oftentimes they'll experience a heightening of their senses. So their vision becomes a bit sharper. They can hear sounds more clearly. Have you heard about that?
We have a lot of cases that people are have vivid dreams. I mean, we cannot explain this, but it's also not only with our device, but also with other devices, who are tackling the vagus nerve. I'm not super big believer in this, because for me it's already a little bit out of science field. It's, I mean, more psychology probably, but of course it's related with science at the same time. Yeah, and we have some, let's say, ketamine clinics who are using Pulsetto with ketamine, in synergy. So, I mean, I spoke with some of them. They believe that's it's a perfect synergy, with that. There is so many angles, what you can test and try, and we are only 2.5 year company, so we want to like in Pareto case, we want to focus on the most important things. And now, for example, we're preparing a big trial in Lithuania for migraine, to one more time to see, to prove, etc. It's a big topic, because it can handle a lot of, people problems and etc.
There's a lot of interest in the whole vagus nerve field right now. And I've seen like new medical devices coming out and being developed pretty much every day. Do you know why? Like what has led to the explosion in the last couple of years?
Even pharma industry, they started to look to those, let's say, electric stimulation devices not as enemies anymore, but as possible friends. It is even, I read a few studies that, for example, if you are mixing drugs, for example, you're doing protocol of medical drugs and then you're doing electric stimulation, it can create even synergetic effect or reverse situation. First of all, you're doing electric stimulation protocol and then you're consuming some kind of, let's say, drugs. So pharma started to see as, I don't know, something like Philip Morris and electric cigarettes. At one point, they realized that it's not enemy anymore. It's like a continuity of their business. So there are a lot of acquisitions from pharma industry, and a lot of interest from their side, and they have money. So that's why it's a quite industry is quite growing. And also in general, I mean, when we look into the vagus nerve, I remember 5 years ago, it was when you inserted in the YouTube vagus nerve, it was like a 3 videos. Now it's like we have automated. Like a Slack channel. Every time something new is posted on YouTube about vagus nerve, you are getting this like a message. So it's like a 10 videos per day, something like that. The trend is growing, growing like a crazy. So the commercial trend is growing because of, let's say, of us, of other companies who are doing education in this field. But at the same time, also, like I said, the pharma is also inserting big money. Just a simple example, by the way. Do you know why sleep wearables, sleep products became so trendy? It was like a 7 years ago, the first growth of the term, because pharma at one point started to promote hugely sleep drugs, and they spent millions on this, and then they move out of this topic, and then suddenly, because of this, let's say, huge effect on media, then Aura came, Whoop, wearable devices, then the mattresses, Casper, Purple, and etc. But basically, but pharma created the fundament of the growth, and etc. So
How are biohackers using this? I'm already thinking of different use cases of like how to get synergies and make this and other things more effective, such as using a VNS. And I should have used that acronym a long time ago to save us thousands of words. But using it before meals to help stimulate digestion, or before meditation sessions to help you go deeper, faster, perhaps before red light. Like, what are the different ways you see, like, more innovative ways of using it?
yeah, so very good point. A lot of biohackers are using before food for the digestion because there are some enzymes who are released also during the stimulation. A lot of people are using before sleep, or for example, if they are waking in the middle of the night and they cannot go to sleep anymore, because the nerve stimulation cannot increase, I don't know, your deep sleep or whatever, but it can tackle with latency of the sleep, especially if you have troubles, to go to the sleep. There is a lot of people who are using after the hard training, especially in the mornings, because your HRV is dropping, something like that. Also, in the morning, because as always, cortisol is jumping, and etc. Before very intensive meeting, or let's say before you're going on the stage and you see that you have like really fight and flight, and you need to find the sweet spot. You don't want, like I said, to be too relaxed, but you don't want to be too like you know narrow on your thoughts, and etc. So this is the typical cases. But biohackers was the first segment of our customers. The majority of our customers are chronic, I mean, sick people. It's chronic stress, panic attacks, insomnia. It's the main target, and you cannot imagine how many people have these conditions.
What's cool about this is you can use it on both sides for helping with the conditions, and then also for the people who are healthy already get a little greater performance. One other one I was just thinking of that I would like to try at some point would be to stack this before a brain training neurofeedback session. So to do some VNS before that, and then do the neurofeedback afterward, and hopefully get a more like neuroplastic state where I'm able to retain the changes and improvements for longer.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, but there are very interesting. So, for example, we have one big dentistry office in UK who put Pulsetto in the waiting room, because before you are going to this procedure. You are like it's a very stressful procedure. Then, for example, one clinic in Europe, they're using in MRT, this when you're doing this magnetic resonant stuff for your head, you're putting in some kind of closed box, and there are people who are claustrophobic and they're just afraid to be in the magnetic this machine, and they're taking like the pills, and instead of pills they're using Pulsetto. I mean, and they are like super happy. So there are a lot of interesting cases how to use. But yeah, you are right. Meditation, to boost the meditation, especially if you can't meditate. I was surprised how many people can't meditate, because for me it seems that meditation is very simple, but in reality it's not simple. Yeah, it needs dedicated practice. So it's like a shortcut or booster, or they're meditating together with a vagus nerve stimulation. So yeah, there are a lot of implications how to use it, but typically it's like a morning evening, before sleep, and in the morning. It's like a two most important, let's say, times.
Yeah, I love the idea of using it around any events that could seem stressful. Say you have a fear of heights or public speaking or whatever it is, then you can use it before that, and perhaps with a natural substance or otherwise to help like reframe your fear response to certain things if you want to. I mean, certain cases that you don't necessarily want to do that, but if you want to get over something, there's some cool ingredients out there that are a bit safer than some of the other ones that could go into one of those stacks.
Yeah, I remember in December I went to Turkey, to Istanbul. It's a crazy city. I was driving like a 14 kilometers, 2 hours, and those Turkey drivers are crazy. They're, I mean, like this, and etc. And I was in such a fight and flight, really. I mean, I was like driving like this, and then I realized that I have Pulsetto with me. I just put Pulsetto, because I mean, otherwise it was like a terrible 1.5 hour of driving experience, and so yeah, you can find the areas, but the most important is to understand where you are the stressful most, and I really glad that, for example, Aura Ring has already the stress, let's say, level data. I'm also wearing, not now, but I'm wearing No Watch, very interesting brand from Netherlands. They are Philips backend. It's basically watch which I can say even better predicts your stress levels, because whenever, for example, you're doing physical activity, Aura says that you are on stress, or something like that. In case of No Watch, they really say that, okay, now at that moment you was on the physical activity, but we see that. But we see on different eye that you are on stress, so they are more accurate, in my opinion, from my first test things. So whenever you see this, let's say, daytime periods when you're stressed, you see the patterns. Yeah, that, for example, I know there are specific meetings when you're in higher stress. Yeah, there are specific events in your life that you are in higher stress. So then you need to do it before or during those events or those meetings. So, for example, to wear the pulsetto in the quite tough meeting, it's one of the ways, how you can be, let's say, more productive or more relaxed, let's say, to find this sweet spot in this meeting, etc.
Cool. Well, Vitalijus, we will start to wind this one down. If people want to connect with you to grab a device, how do they go about that?
Our official website is pulsetto.tech. Also, you can find on Amazon in US. At the same time, you can always write to me personally, Vitalijus at pulsetto.tech. But this the I mean, official website is the best place, where to buy, or where check more information about our product.
I think I have a code for listeners. If you guys use the code, I want to say it's urban. I'll put it in the show notes. That'll save you on your order as well. Are there any resources you recommend people check out to learn more about the vagus nerve and vagus nerve stimulation specifically?
You can find, it's Stanley Rosenberg. It's a very nice science person, and he wrote a book about the vagus nerve, a lot of data and a lot of exercises about it. Those who want to go deeper, I really encourage to follow Kevin Tracy and his work. At this moment, I believe that he's one of the top, let's say, experts in this field, and he's doing really good stuff. We as a company also providing more and more content in this topic.
Perfect. Finally, what is one thing that the Pulsetto tribe does not know about you?
Really big believer that we will create very universal product which consists minimum of 20, 30 different signals. And it will be life changing for a lot of people. So this is the thing, but I believe that also that they never knew about my sleep experiments, which I describe. By the way, now I'm collecting the third part for the 100 nights, and now it's becoming even more sophisticated stuff. My one friend owned me the specific tent where I need to sleep. It's like a high altitude tent and etc. And by this tent, you are losing the oxygen, but at the same time, red amount of the red cells will increase. So I am collecting the list of those very unique stuff, in order to test for the sleep. So probably this is my passion. I have very big passion of sleep biohacking and testing different things. And yeah, one day maybe I will write more about those experiments, etc.
Yeah, I was going to say, I encourage you to create a list and share that online somewhere so we can all follow along to see what you've been testing and what's worked so far for you and what hasn't.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I've had a blast learning about VNS tech and what you guys are working on over at Pulsetto.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks.
I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and hit the thumbs up. I love knowing who's in the 1% committed to reaching their full potential. Comment 1% below so that I know who you are. For all the resources and links, meet me on my website at mindbodypeak.com. I appreciate you and look forward to connecting with you. As a reminder, the information depicted in this video is for information purposes only. Please consult your primary healthcare professional before making any lifestyle changes.